Hey guys, this is Colin from Blackjack Apprenticeship, and I am on this podcast with BJA Member and full-time or three-quarter-time card poker player. How you doing?
Pretty good, Colin. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. Good to get this going. I know you wrote a post recently, and it got people clamoring for a podcast with you, and so we kind of made it happen fairly quickly. So thanks for doing this.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's start at the beginning of your story as far as how did you get interested in advantage play and card counting?
Yeah, so I would have to say it was basically from as long as I can remember. Of course, I didn't really call it advantage play back then. I didn't know that was really a thing. I used to play poker with my family when I was probably like 6 or 7. I've always been pretty much a games player, card games, board games, video games, all the stuff, anything that has like a strategy to it. And so very quickly and kind of intuitively, I figured out that poker was a game that could be beaten. The better player won, just like in chess. Of course, there's a little bit of luck involved. And it was pretty much that kind of started me on the road. And that's why when I joined Blackjack Apprenticeship, I made my name Pokrplyer. And just to kind of give a reference to my poker history. How I got started with card counting, it kind of started in high school. The movie 21 had came out, and like almost 90% of everyone that's on a podcast or anything, they watched the movie and thought, hey, maybe I could do that. And I was only like 16 or 17 at the time, so there was no way I was going to get into a casino. But I thought the idea was interesting, and I watched some YouTube videos. I didn't actually end up finding yours. It was this other YouTube video that just kind of went over high-low. I taught myself that. I used to play poker with some friends of mine, and they came over and I said, hey, let's play blackjack. And so I'm counting the cards in my head, and we're playing, and the count gets to like a 5 or 6 or something like that. And so I put all my chips out. My friend gets a blackjack, and I get like a 16, and I lose. So I was like, oh no, this doesn't work. This is BS or something. I don't know. And so I kind of forgot about it. Thought maybe it was something that didn't exist anymore. I didn't know. And as I put in my post, I was in the military. When I got out of the military, I started playing poker at a local club. And when I was learning more about that, that's when I found your videos on YouTube about Blackjack Apprenticeship and card counting. And so I started looking into it that way.
So how serious did you take poker?
Never really serious. It was more, I'd say, an intellectual thing. And it was like I knew money could be made there because, you know, like they say in the movie Rounders, it's like the same 10 people win the World Series of Poker every year. So either it's rigged or there's a strategy to it. I did want to start playing, but I kind of had the same reservations that you've talked about in the past, where it's like you don't know exactly what your edge is. And you really never know what the right play is. You know, there's good hands, and there's bad hands. And so I was working my way through mastering that and starting to play for really low stakes, but trying to work my way up. And that's when I found card counting, and I kind of made the switch over to there. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So were you more of a no limit or like a limit?
No limit.
Okay. Did you read books on it, or how did you kind of approach that?
Pretty much all of it. I have some books. I have a couple of the super systems and some Daniel Negreanu's books and stuff like that. And I downloaded some like PDFs and stuff that were from like the heyday, but since I wasn't old enough to play when all the internet poker went out, and I live in the Northeast, and the only online markets I could go to would be like driving to New Jersey, and I didn't want to do that. So online poker was never really an option for me. And I also lived in North Carolina for a while, so that was never really an option for me. And so it was more just with friends, because in Eastern North Carolina, the closest casino was Cherokee, which is like 10 hours away. And so poker, it wasn't until I left the military and came back home that I got into some local clubs and started playing and winning.
Well, in my experience, playing with friends can actually be pretty good because they get to know you and you have to adjust, you know? Like we used to play quite a bit, Ben and I and his wife and my wife and some other friends. And, you know, they would figure out they could like push me around until I was like, no, I'm not going to get pushed around. And then all of a sudden, you know, then their bluffs didn't work anymore, and I was beating them, and so then they had to adjust, and it actually was a good thing because it makes you work through some of those things. But playing in a live casino is can be pretty different from home games. I never took it real seriously, but I still find it interesting talking to someone that got into poker. My theory is that there's not a lot of people that are interested in both card counting and poker. That the people that are into card counting, kind of like I think why you made the switch. It's the system, the edge. It's just a matter of perfecting it and getting in the hours. With poker, I would say generally poker players have a lot more gamble in them. Where they're
I've definitely noticed that. When I started, I think I started learning out the right way because I knew it was a game of math. So I learned about EV and odds and calculations and stuff, but I was always looking for like the system, like, okay, how do I know what the right play is?
Yeah.
And every resource is like, well, that depends. What's the player been playing like? How old is he? How is this? And I got frustrated because it was like learn hundreds of different charts and different positions and all this stuff. And there's solvers. And I got good enough to beat almost all of my friends completely consistently. All of them still remember the story of the one time they beat me. And I'm like, and they're like, nope, not playing you anymore. And I'm like, we don't even play for real money, so come on.
Yeah.
But so I still love the game, and I play it with friends and family, because I consider it like chess, and I think poker has a really good analogy for like life, in that there's always the chance, and you never know exactly what the next card is. But there's a lot of that blackjack too, which I learned after studying.
Yeah, and I think with poker, there's even some different analogies than to life than blackjack, because with poker you could actually shift the odds by like if you can win the psychological game, whereas blackjack it's just the science of it, but real life there's the science, and then there's also the personal or the relational element to life that can be shifted. I think that's why I liked Limit better, because it's much more just the science. Of course, home games, you're not playing Limit. Well, actually, sometimes they play some Limit home games. I never got into it, but they get into some pretty wild, odd variations for higher stakes than I was comfortable with, because I didn't think I could play positive EV for some of those things. How do you think that helped with the transition into blackjack? Just already understanding EV and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is I had a pretty good foundation with math. I did very well in math in high school and whatnot, and I've always liked it. And so it was pretty easy, I think, for me to recognize that, if you have 52 cards in a deck and one card comes out, and learning like outs in poker, you just expand that to 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever decks they have. And so the math seemed pretty intuitive, I guess I would say. Obviously, when you get 6 decks and all the deviations and strategies and stuff like that, the actual math is a little complicated, but I still think I understood it. And I've never had any gamble in me, even playing poker. So I think that's why blackjack and those more stable, I guess you'd say, advantage plays are more what I like to do now.
Yeah. And you said you were also in the military. How did that, or did it play into, helping you as you got into advantage play and card counting?
Yeah. So actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts. It was the roundtable you did with JC Note, Levi Mitch, and Spartan a couple years ago. And one of the things they were talking about, it was the one about going pro, is your ability to interact with people in like authoritarian positions. And I think that honestly is one of the biggest things I got out of the military. Is I always had like drill sergeants or whoever. So I was always in chaotic situations, and I needed to learn not to break down. So I've told people back off stories and whatever, which mine has pretty much mostly been completely cordial and nice. But I was never afraid of anything any pit boss or security could do, because I've been in worse
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, go ahead, take a swing at me. I will get a lawyer and I will own this place. So please do.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've thought a whole lot about that. I wonder if it made me think about probably my like religious school upbringing, preparing, because I was getting in trouble all growing up for things that were like ridiculous to get in trouble for,
Yeah.
Because these rules that I thought were silly, and I would bend the rules or not follow the rules or whatever. And I wasn't a bad kid. I was just like, oh, you're going to make me wear a tie? I'm going to wear a wooden tie, or, just the stupid stuff. Or they say my hair can be a certain length. I'm going to have it exactly that length. And then they're going to, I remember being told your hair isn't too long, but we're going to send you home anyway because we don't like how much you're pushing it. It's like when you're used to that in a casino being like, we don't like that you're playing well. Who cares? You don't get that offended. But the military is like that to the nth degree because you're literally getting like yelled at and, and you just have to learn how to handle it.
Yeah. So I think between that and I did do a lot of the resources you put out when I was starting and talking to like Joe748 and stuff like that at the boot camps. When I got my first back off, I was just none of it caught me by surprise. I know you were going to get into this later, but my first back off story, I remember they walked up to me and there was 3 of them, and the one was like, "Hey, do you have any ID?" And because of all the resources I've read, I knew exactly what was up. So I was like, "Oh yeah, they already checked me at the door." And they're like, "Well, we need to see it again." I was like, "I have the bracelet. They already checked me at the door." And they're like, "Well, we're not going to let you play blackjack anymore." And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "Well, I really need to see your ID or else you're not going to be able to stay here." And I'm like, "Okay, wait, right?" And I just walked away.
Yeah.
And
did you cash out then, or did you just?
Yeah, I just went ahead and cashed out.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was when I was very first starting, so it wasn't even any serious money. So in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have cashed out because they could have withheld my chips, but I hadn't learned that yet. That's one of the things. Now I would probably just leave and come back later, especially since it was only a couple hours away from my house.
Yeah.
I would have just left. But at that time I didn't care. I already knew I wasn't given my ID, and they just told me to cash out. So I was like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, you played it pretty perfectly, which is actually, the more people I've talked to, it's pretty rare the first time. I think most times people kind of panic. And I said it on a podcast not too long ago, like, don't hand them your ID, but people panic because I don't think it's almost like the mental reps. You got to have those mental reps of what a back off's going to be like, so that you follow it like you did.
Yeah, and that's what I did feel the pressure. They know what they're doing, and so there was 3 suits all around me, and they're all trying to talk to me, and they just keep like reaching out for my ID and like wanting me to hand it to them, and I'm like, no, I'm good. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And as I've gone through, I found that a lot of people, pit bosses or security or whomever, they know the deal just as well as I do, and so a lot of my back offs have started with, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yep. If you know that I know and I know that you know, all right.
Yeah.
And the one guy's like, so what's your name? And I'm like, he's like, yeah, you don't have to give it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So.
So is there any specific stories from the military that come to mind when you think about handling whatever intense authoritative or authoritarian situations?
I wouldn't say there's any specific story, unfortunately. It was just kind of a general, I guess, sense that gets drilled into you starting from basic training. And my time in the military, it wasn't anything special. I never actually deployed or anything like that. So I just spent all my time stateside and learned and studied and did that. But I still had supervisors and stuff that would get mad at me. And it was kind of a lot of the same stuff you just talked about, little rules that I was like, I know why we have rules, but some of these are just ridiculous. And so I would try and get my way out of them. And that got me in trouble a couple times. But that's the way it works.
Cool. So let's get back into you trained. What was that process like? You yeah, I mean, you found some videos online. Did you you got a membership and went through all that stuff, and then how is that transition from training to playing?
So one of the very first things I did was just, I think I saw a forum post or something from Joe748, or maybe it was one of the write-ups you did on the website, and it was talking about how he was like, his training process was just watch all the videos in the video course twice. And so that's what I did. And I think before I even got a membership, I'd watched every one of your videos on YouTube at the time of me watching them once or twice. And I'm a really cheap person, so I didn't want to pay the money for the membership if I didn't think it was going to be worth it. So I wanted to get everything I could for free. And so I got the basic strategy charts and the deviations. And I think when I just started, you would release the one, like the top 2 deviations was the 16 versus 10 and insurance. And so I was memorizing those. And I was running into a couple roadblocks, I guess I'd say, where it's like I didn't know. I knew I didn't know what I needed to know, but I didn't know how to get that answer. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe a membership is the way to go. And like, again, a lot of people have talked about on your podcast, I was like, there's a chance this is just a scam, but let me try it out and see what happens. And if it is, I'll call my credit card and say, hey, this isn't legit. Yeah. Give me my money back. And turns out it's not a scam. What do you know? And because most of the time when I see stuff like that, I have red flags going off in my head. Like, if this was real, why aren't they doing it? And the math just doesn't seem to add up. And especially through all the YouTube videos and all the resources, I was like, that doesn't seem like that's the way this is. Card counting is real as far as many, many other resources. And I really think there's something here. And so I figured I'll give it a shot, see what happens. Worst case scenario, I'm out a couple $100 and I just have to cancel my membership. But turns out that was well worth the investment. Cool. And transitioning from learning to play, it was kind of abrupt. I really took to heart the stories and stuff about you have. I don't know where it's at. I haven't looked at it in a while. I think it's on the homepage, the card counter checklist. And you study basic strategy, and then you study deviations and betting, and then you go to a casino and back count. And so that's what I did. Is I first went to the casino, my local one, and I was just back counting. And I brought a little bit of money with me, which would have been risky, but I was just back counting a table, and getting into the casino, it was just so easy. I was testing myself at home at the highest speeds and all that stuff. And so it went up to like a running 15 or 20 with 2 decks left. And I was like, well, I'm here. I can't not bet this. And so I sat down, I bet, and it only lasted a couple hands. And I ended up like breaking even or taking a tiny, tiny loss because I was like basically minimum betting. I think it was $15 minimums at the table I was at because I didn't want to risk anything. And so I felt really confident with that. I did a little bit more studying, and I started taking some time at the casinos and getting used to that. And that was a little bit before I went to the boot camp. And there was one session. This was I want to say like March or April or something of 2018 or 2019. And you hadn't had the pro betting software finished yet. There was just this little app. I don't know. Some of the older people may remember. And so I just put in like an effective bankroll, quote unquote, and I just took a good win rate and I just bet that. And it was like 1 to 2 by 20 or something like that. And I was just like, okay, let me bet that. And I played that off and on for a couple weeks as practice. But again, like almost every other Blackjack players, it was massively overbet for the amount of money I had. And
so like a 1 to 40 bet spread, like one unit to 2 spots of 20 units. Yeah, something like that. And no, I think it was 2 spots of 10. I don't think it was that big. So but, 1 to 20 bet spread, but you didn't really consider the risk of that bet spread.
Yeah, because I didn't have CVCX at the time, and I didn't really know how much the change in bankroll affected the risk. I thought it was a more
Yeah.
linear instead of an exponential thing, and so I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll just take a little bit. I'm about half this, so it should be good." And fortunately, I didn't lose it, but it was about 2 or 3 weeks before I attended my boot camp. I got into a session at the table where it was max betting and splitting and doubling and splitting and splitting and splitting.
Yeah.
And I had basically all my money on the felt.
Your entire
And
bankroll.
basically. And I was like, how did this happen? Now, fortunately, it averaged out that I like won it all back. And I think I was up a small little profit on one of the hands. But I took my money right after that and just left. And I was like, this is clearly too much risk, whatever. And I haven't actually got my skills test out. So I'm done in the casino for now until boot camp.
Yeah. And what was your goal at that point? I mean, you were working a full-time job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can't remember exactly in the timeline, but I've kind of always known that the corporate lifestyle isn't for me. There's just so many inefficiencies, and it's like, even if I know the right answer, everyone's just like, let's talk about it for 3 hours. And so I was kind of wanting to replace that, or move on from that job into something else, but still have money on the side. And I would say that that's kind of what I never intended to go full time, I guess you'd say. And it was just, let's try this out and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you put together a bankroll?
So that's kind of the whole crux of my story that I posted on the forum. It was shortly after the boot camp. Well, I guess I should take this back. When I turned 18, I had read some finance books and stuff like that, and I kind of had a trajectory of my financial path. And so I started getting credit cards, and I read like the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss and Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Oh, yeah.
So I learned from those books that there's a way that everyone does things, and then there's usually these side ways that few people think of but are much more profitable. And so I started getting credit cards and building my credit. And, that was like 6 years ago or something like that. 7 years ago, I started really building my credit. And so one of the techniques that they use in credit cards is occasionally you get these 0% interest balance transfer offers. Well, what you do in the credit card world is you take that balance transfer, you invest it for a year, then you take that back out, pay off the credit card, and then you get that little bit of interest as a profit. Well, I had just finished my boot camp, and one of my credit cards sent me a little letter in the mail and said, hey, we're going to give you a 0% interest balance transfer, and you got a little over a year to pay it back, and cost you nothing. And I was like, well, okay, that's convenient timing. And so I called my mom, I called my grandpa, and asking about finance and just double checking, triple checking that this is what I thought it was. And yeah, it was. So I signed the paper, I deposited the money into my bank account, and then about 2 or 3 days later, my other credit card from the same bank sent me a letter. It's the same deal. And then so at that point, I had basically maxed out both of those credit cards and had like $10,000-$12,000. And then within like the next month, 2 other credit cards had sent me the same offer.
Oh, wow.
And so I just said, well, if I'm already all in on these other ones, might as well go all in on this. And I had, on some of them, it was just a year, and some of it was like 2 years. And I said, I know I can get the hours, and let's see what happens. Worst case scenario, I don't get any hours, and this doesn't work out, and I just pay it all back in a year, and it's a fun story. Best case scenario, I end up making, millions of dollars, and I'm on the cover of Forbes magazine or something. And I'm writing my own book.
So I've got a couple of questions about that. Well, maybe this isn't a question, but I wonder, those other credit cards that sent you similar offers a month later, I wonder if they smelled blood in the water, if they saw the activity, or if it's just complete coincidence that all these offers were coming in.
I don't know. I don't think enough time had actually passed for
Yeah,
the credit cards to report. So
probably coincidence.
I think it was just coincidence that it's
Yeah.
like based on my credit history and payment history and all that stuff. They all decided that it was like, hey, here's some free money. They probably
Yeah.
wouldn't do that to everyone that just came back from a trip to Vegas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
could have worked out bad for
Um,
them. Could have worked out bad for me. But
So was it Ramit Sethi that would talk about investing the credit card balances? Or
I don't think he did, but
okay,
I think it was one of the rabbit holes I went through
okay.
studying his kind of stuff.
And
Um,
how would people invest it? Because even the stock market is kind of a crapshoot in any given year. I mean, I guess you
mhm,
shouldn't lose too much in a year.
mhm.
It would take like a real downturn, recession or something to lose much.
So
But
yeah, I had never done it before, and it's not really well talked about, and I don't think there's any really great plans. But it's trying to get like good safe CDs or bonds or something
oh, okay,
that'll pay
sure,
you it's just a tiny percent, but every percent counts.
yeah,
And so yeah, you could invest in the stock market if you were a little more gambly,
yeah,
because the variance on a year in the stock market can just go crazy.
yeah,
Um, so I had never done it before because I didn't want to take that risk. But once I had passed my test out at the boot camp and I knew my game was good and I had over a year to do it, I figured, well, if Joe748 and Yoshi and they all can make $1 million in a year, maybe I can too. So
yeah.
we'll get some hours in.
We don't. I don't think I've talked about this before, but we would do this during the church team days because investing in the team was such a good return, and we just got so many hours,
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of the same thing where it's like, well, if this doesn't work, it wasn't like we're going to lose our house,
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, well, we're going to have to pay, pull a bunch of my investment and pay that off, but we didn't do it like to the max, but if they offered me, 10 grand, 0% for 18 months, like,
Yep.
yeah, I'll invest that for about a year and make maybe a 30% return on it and then pay it down or pay it back. It's the same thing. We would use HELOC money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm always really cautious to tell people don't take out a credit card loan, to become a card carrier, because I think it lends to someone that doesn't really, they probably haven't perfected their game. They probably don't understand that, they just think, oh, I'm going to max out my credit card, go to the casino, make some quick money and, pay it back. And that's really a recipe for disaster. But
Yeah.
for someone
That's
risk averse that understands what they're doing, I've done very similar things.
Yeah, that's what I prefaced my forum post with. This is not financial advice. I don't advise anyone doing
Yeah.
this, because
Yeah.
that could lead to, especially if you get just a regular credit card, cash advance or whatever. Those
Yeah.
are 26% interest starting from the day you take it out, and it's possible, but the risk is just massive.
Yeah, that's probably really gambling.
Yeah.
And like you said, you had a backup plan. If it didn't work
Mhm.
out, you're gonna grind at your job and
Yeah.
work it out. So when that happened, so you kind of mentioned you came to a boot camp, and that's where I met you. Was at a boot camp. I mean, I'd seen you on the forum and all that stuff, but
Yep.
Came to boot camp. Your game was really solid. You passed your evaluation. Is that right?
Yep.
Who was that with? Who tested you?
David.
Oh,
Loud and
okay.
often.
Loud and often.
Yep.
Awesome. And you knew your game was good. You'd put in the training ahead of time. Now you had a bankroll. How much of a bankroll?
It added up to just about $30,000.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So
And
I,
you just
I knew that was
yeah.
enough to get going, and but I started out small. I started out basically like I was still on like a $5,000 or $10,000 bankroll for the first some hours.
Okay. This is before you got the credit card offers, or you played off a smaller bankroll even after you had gotten those offers?
Before and during, while the money was still
Okay.
coming in, and I was still kind
Got
of
it.
figuring it out.
hmm And so what was your plan? Just hit it hard for a year and while working, or?
So actually, a couple coincidences happened at the time. The job I was working at, the company wasn't doing too well, and I didn't really like my job. It was supposed to be an IT job, but I was ended up like working in shipping and doing packaging all the time, and that's not what I wanted to do. I've always had an interest in IT and computers and security and stuff like that, and they were having me do spreadsheets and data entry, and I was like, this is not. And they threw me on the marketing team too, and so it wasn't working out for me. It wasn't really working out for them, and so I decided to go back to school and try and get some sort of degree. And now that I was doing Blackjack, I was thinking more of a math degree and maybe have something that would help me out with that. And so I left my job and I started to pursue school, and that never worked out. The timing didn't work out. I can't remember how long I had to be living in the state, because I had problems before with like in-state tuition. And so it just didn't work out for the semester. I didn't want to pay all that money. And so I just decided not to go to school. Yeah. And then the good thing is, because of the military, I did get out with some muscle and nerve back problems, just minor, but I do get the VA payments. And because I live pretty frugally, and this is I think one other important part about my story that's really unique and important to know before you try and take out $30,000 is, because of this guaranteed money, aside from complete government collapse, basically all my expenses have been taken care of. So food and home and all that stuff. So I didn't have to worry about having like a massive emergency fund. Because I knew if I wasn't making money and I needed to cut back to zero expenses, I could. And move in with friends or family and eat ramen noodles and not drive my car and cut down on my phone plan. I knew I could be totally expense free and just play blackjack. So that was a very important part of the consideration of taking out the money, is I wouldn't be stuck in a point where it's like, oh, my car broke down and I can't get to work and I can't pay my bills. And so now I need to take my bankroll money to use in my car. And I didn't want to have any of that risk or headache. So I made sure that was taken care of before I started any of that.
Yeah. It's funny. This strikes me as very similar to kind of like a startup. You know, I think that, Mark Cuban's been in the news recently for some interviews he's done, and he talks about how he hustled, you know, starting out and like living off of very little and all that stuff. It's, you know, it's very, very similar when you're trying to go pro at the beginning as an advantage player. It's like, hey, I'm gonna have to hustle here, you know, and so. You took kind of a unique approach, though, where you didn't just go full time. It wasn't just like, let me get in every hour that I can. Can you talk a little bit about that and why and how?
Yeah, so I kind of coined the term 3/4 full time, mainly just for the interview. I was talking with Grease Monkey, who's was posted on the forum and stuff like that, and when I was being considered, and people were asking about a podcast, and so I kind of coined the term to help explain that. Basically, I guess my personality type or whatever, it's kind of like all or nothing. So it's one of the reasons I don't think I worked well in a corporate environment, is because I can work very quick and very efficiently and do a whole lot, or nothing. And spending 8 hours a day in a cubicle just was not working out, because I can't fill my time with 8 hours of work every day. And very few people can. And so I started what I call three-quarter full time, in where that I can still have the freedom to go see friends and family, take basically elongated vacations wherever I want. But several times a year, I basically decided that I was going to take an entire month and just go somewhere and play for the entire month, and nothing but blackjack. Well, depending on where I was at, see the sights, go to the Grand Canyon or whatever. I was in Arizona, but it was going to be blackjack. So I had my first big whole month one actually just about a year ago. And that's when I positive variance swung my way. I made some money, and that helped me pay off some stuff. And I just repeated that process throughout the year.
So how many month like blackjack stints do you try to do?
I try and get My plan is 2 huge ones every year, usually one in the summer and one in the winter, and then more like half, like 2 or 3 week long ones every couple months. And I try and get some local joints in and just do a couple hours here or there wherever I can. But based on my level of play and stuff like that, it's oftentimes better for me to fly across the country and play in good games than go to mediocre games a couple hours away.
Yeah. Just more EV for the effort.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like this approach has been working?
It's been working pretty well. One thing that I do like, some of it has to do with luck, but having like a full-time approach sometimes, it really helps you get over the variance quickly. And I think it was in Blackjack Attack, or maybe it was Blackjack Blueprint. I can't remember which book, but one of them was talking about how as a part-timer, your losing streaks can last a longer amount of like months or years, because you only play 20, 30 hours in sometimes 2 or 3 months. And so, a 30-hour losing streak or break-even streak is very, very easy to happen. And so if you're a pro, you can get over those 30, 40, 50-hour losing streaks just like that, just real quick. And it'll only take maybe a couple weeks. And so that's part of the reason I've done that. And I've been fortunate enough to finish all my long trips up. And so I get sometimes $10,000, $12,000 in EV, and I've both of my biggest trips I finished a good bit above that. And so I haven't had these long losing streaks kind of wearing me down, because those do get kind of annoying.
Yeah, those will wear anybody down. Are you tempted to like extend a trip if you're not doing well? I guess you maybe haven't had to cross that bridge yet.
It has happened, not on the long trips. And that is something I have done. I was playing in the Northeast, and I was attempting to make my way down to North Carolina to visit friends and family I have there. And it started off going really well. And then in about one session, I lost everything I had made, and it was very early in the beginning, and I was almost down to 0 in profit. And it was just a massive hit. And it was funny because I had, I don't know if you remember this, or I sent you an email like the day before on how this was working out. It was like my first big trip, and it was great, and I'm so happy I went to the boot camp and everything. And the next day, I lost it all. And I was sitting in my car, and I was just like, I'm trying to rethink this. Is it working? And it had been a couple weeks, I think, after or before you posted your video with Loud and Often and Pink Chip about the biggest losses. And so I just rewatched that, and I got myself recentered, and I was like, if they can go through $90,000 losses in an hour, I can go through this. And so I went back to the casino, and in about, I'd say 4 or 5 hours, I just had a great session and made almost all of it back. And so my bankroll chart just looked like a check mark, basically. It went down, back up, and I was like, oh, so this is what variance is. Got it.
Yep. So you didn't need to extend that trip since you started turning it around.
No. There was a trip later on. I ended up in Maryland, and things started going south, and so I stayed around a couple extra days, and never turned around completely. It was more of like a break even, and I had plans in North Carolina, so I was like, okay, I'll leave this one alone for now. But
So you said that you took your first big trip. Was it just about a year ago?
Yeah.
And so what? Where are we at? October? I don't know. 4 or 5 months into this experiment, there happened to be a once in 100 years pandemic that struck. How did that kind of affect the whole plan?
So I will admit it was a little anxiety inducing because I did my first big trip in about started at the end of October last year, and I made some money and it was great, and I was like, I just need to do this and keep making EV. But I spent December at home with family, and January I got sick. Like basically the entire month. I somehow got 2 different flus or something. I recovered for like 3 days and got sick again. And February, my best friends in North Carolina were having their second child, so I wanted to go down there and help them since I had the freedom to do so.
Yeah.
And then my plan was come back in March. I had some paperwork and stuff to do. And end of March and all through April, I was going to be all over the Southwest, just casino. And so I booked hotels, I booked flights, and I was so excited to be going back down there and seeing the pros that live down there and friends, and hopefully going to a boot camp if there was going to be one in the time period. And then COVID started making its way to U.S. And I was like, I'm young. I'm just going to do this. But then casinos started closing down.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, well, this is not going to work out. So I had to cancel all my hotels and rental cars and stuff like that. And then I just waited. And like I said, I still had money coming in. So I was very stable throughout the pandemic before casinos started opening up. And so I had all my payments taken care of. But the biggest crunch was that that year mark was the deadline was approaching ever so close. Yeah. And I was like, this was the trip I was supposed to make all the EV that would finish up my credit cards. And now it's canceled and there's no end in sight. So once casinos started opening back up, I went on some small trips, and I went on a big trip back to Southern California, and that's where I made all my money back, paid it all off, came home, and I wrote the forum post.
Yeah, that you were able to pay off all the credit card and still be left with a bankroll to continue playing.
So once all my credit card payments post, and I've got some that I still haven't paid off because the deadline isn't here yet and the money's just sitting in my account. But once all that posts, I'll be completely debt free, car paid off, phone paid off, everything paid off, and I have a bankroll. So
if you get those credit card offers again, are you going to use them to double your bankroll and head back out?
There's a decent chance I may do that.
The other option is that's your like emergency bankroll, I guess.
Yeah. So if I get those offers, I probably will take it, and then just leave it in the back, and just have it in a savings account or whatever, and just see what happens. And because that's one of my strategies that I used is I didn't actually consider all of the money I borrowed as a bankroll. I kept like $5,000 less for my risk of ruin calculations, because in case something went bad and I needed to make a payment or something. And so I wanted to keep my risk of ruin very, very low, because I did have a backup plan. And part of the strategy actually came from the 4-Hour Work Week. And have you read the book?
Yeah, I think I listened to the audiobook.
Okay. Yeah. So he talks about business and all this stuff, and that really kind of inspired me growing up and wanting to be in business and making money. And one of the things he talks about is like writing down your biggest fears and what's really the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is I can go get another IT job. I can go work for somebody. I can work maybe for some family, work construction again, do electrical work, and make these credit card payments. And it might suck. Having to go back and get a real job and not have all the freedoms I was getting used to. But that's absolute worst case scenario. Yeah. And if anything comes out of this, then I have huge odds to make good money and do well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point is, to do that, to think through the worst case scenario, it really for 2 reasons. One, because like you said, sometimes it's like not really so bad. Not so daunting, and we can have all this fear around something that's like, oh yeah, well maybe I have to get a job again, you know?
Yeah.
But I think I was just working on outlining a new YouTube video is about how much money to bring to a casino. And the obvious answer for a gambler is like, well, don't bring more than you're willing to lose. But I was saying the same thing of like, well, think through what it'll actually feel like the next morning, because I could imagine some gambler being like, oh yeah, well, if I lost $1,000, that's okay. And that, like, would you really feel okay the next morning? You're going to feel like crap that you lost that. So, I guess the two sides are think through worst case scenario, because sometimes it really isn't that bad. Other times it's like, are you really going to be okay with that? Are you going to be okay getting a job? And if you are, then great. You've thought through it, you can stomach it, and you know what you're getting yourself into. But I think from hearing from you, you're I'd say much more like me, where more on the cautious side than the gambler that's like, oh, I'm not going to be worried if I lose all this money. Like you're thinking through your risk, and you really know what you're getting yourself into.
Exactly.
So what has the experience of being a 3/4 time or I'll just say a traveling AP, what has that been like compared to what you're expecting? Has it been easier, harder, better, worse?
All of the above.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it. This is one of the things when I was talking to Grease Monkey about, before I was an active AP or anything like that, I've always had I guess you call it like a traveling gene. And so road trips, cross country, I'd done a couple of those even by myself way before stepping foot into a casino. And so that part of having to hit the road and drive hours and hours and hours for me, it hasn't been like even a consideration, because I was doing that and I love doing that way before being in a casino. And so that part, I know a lot of people talk about having to be aware of that, and I do think that's true. If you're considering becoming either a part-time or even a full-time pro, you have to consider the travel, because unless you live in some very, very nice locations, like you live in Las Vegas, you're going to have to travel a lot to get in hours. And for me, that was basically a no factor. I was going to do that regardless of me playing cards. So I think that has been very helpful for my transition, because it really wasn't a transition. Like we talked about earlier, one of the things that was harder was getting used to those losses. And especially starting out, my paychecks were maybe a couple $100, and then I'm transitioning to a point where I'm betting and losing and winning more than a month's wages in an hour.
Yeah.
But I think because of poker and kind of the mindset that I had learned from that, I had really learned that it's not money. This isn't my house payment or a new phone or food. This is business assets. And so it didn't really take a whole lot of getting used to. At the very beginning, there was some, like I told you, when I lost basically everything I had won in one day, I had to recenter myself and get a better mindset. But that was something that was good. But I think, and you talked about this in previous podcasts, the best thing that was better than I hoped for is just the freedom that I have. And which can be a double-edged sword, as I mentioned in the notes before, but I do have the freedom to go wherever, pretty much whenever I want, aside from COVID, of course.
Yeah.
But so the freedoms was definitely even better than I'd hoped for.
So what advice would you give someone else that's considering going full-time or 3/4 time?
Yeah. So the first thing you need to know is your game perfect? So either go to a boot camp or contact one of the other pros in your area on the forums. If you don't know your game is perfect, even if you've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on your own, at least for me, there may be something in the back of your head saying, is my game perfect? And when you're on a losing streak, that even having been tested out and playing as long as I have, sometimes I get on a losing streak and it's like, did I make mistakes? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And if you don't have your game tested out, that's got to be even bigger. And like it was before I went to the boot camp, and you're risking money and sometimes serious money. So I think that's probably the most important thing you need to have straightened away before considering really any type of play, but especially full time. The second biggest thing is any restrictions you have on your traveling. For me, like I said, I've always been a traveler all across the country, but if you have family or some health issues or other travel restrictions, that really needs to be a consideration before you take out $30,000 in credit card debt.
Yeah. Anything else?
The last thing would really just be to listen to as much as you can. Go through, for this question specifically, I actually went through the going pro section of the roundtable discussion, and most of the stuff I think that should be considered is mentioned there with Levi, Mitch, Spartan, and JC Note. So for anyone out there that hasn't already listened to those podcasts 100 times, definitely go back and listen to them.
Cool. I think those are members only. So if you're not a member, sorry, not a plug for the membership, but I think if people are like, where the hell is that podcast? I think it's only in the membership. Those roundtable ones are only in.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, I agree. Listen to and read whatever you can. Talk to me a little bit about networking and how that's played into your experience as a card counter.
I would have to say it's basically invaluable. I never considered starting out that would be as big of a factor as it really is. I started out on the forums trying to reach out to the pros that had done previous podcasts or were active on the forums. And then going to my boot camp, I met quite a few people. And Grease Monkey especially, he's been, we talk about every month or so. And when I'm going through losing situations or winning situations, it really helps to just talk to someone who understands. And even though I know that, I lost, that's the way the game works, just refocus and get myself straightened out and hit the table the next day or the next shift even. And having people to talk to about it, I think that's the biggest help. And I think newer people on the forums and just joining the site, they may not consider how valuable that can really be for that aspect alone.
You had mentioned something when before talking about kind of worst case and best case scenario of networking. Is there anything any advice you wanted to give?
Just with networking, be careful. I mean, you've said it 100 times. Everyone says it a whole lot. Don't post your address on the forum, and try and be as discreet as you can on public forums like our forum and any other Blackjack forums you may be a part of. There is best case scenarios. I've met some very good people and I've learned a lot from and I've worked with. I don't have, fortunately, any bad stories from any networking, but I know they exist, and it's been repeated many times. I think I just saw a forum post the other day. Just be careful and try and keep aware of your own security as much as you can.
I don't have any bad experiences networking with our forum or others. I mean, there's like one crazy dude a few years ago that was like out there, but I think he's disappeared at this point. You want to be wise about it. Someone was asking me recently, well, how do I tell? And I said, well, you kind of got to take the time to get to know people. But for those who don't know, on our forum, there is the boot camp badge that basically says someone's been to a boot camp. Now, that doesn't mean I personally vouch for them. Yeah. But it does say this person is serious enough that they spent some money on their training, and that we have met them personally. And so then you could say like, hey, this person that says they've been to a boot camp, what can you tell me about them? And then of course, if someone has the pro badge, then that means that I actually have personally vouched, like, yes, I know this person is a professional AP. So that's a little pro tip for you if, on a form of kind of like, that doesn't mean someone that doesn't have a boot camp badge or doesn't have a pro badge can't be trusted. It just means, whether they've been around other serious APs.
Because that's what I even remember at my boot camp. There was a guy there, and you probably have seen it a million times, who just knew more than everyone else. And I don't actually remember who he was, but there was a lot of conversation with him and a lot of other pros where he was trying to correct them on stuff that he was wrong about.
Oh, yeah.
So I think for anyone that knows just a little bit, it's pretty easy to spot those people. So
yeah, and our forum is really good about correcting. Like those people can't really exist on our forum very well because there's enough reputable people that will correct them. But yeah, in a live environment, there are the people that want to come across as a know-it-all, even if they're not. And it's happened since the first ever boot camp. If you're paying attention, I'm going to correct them. I'm going to call them out. But yeah, you got to be careful of self-proclaimed experts.
Definitely.
So do you have any classic back off or trespass stories you could share with us?
I guess both unfortunately and fortunately, not anything too out of the ordinary, nothing that I would tell at like a blackjack party or nothing like that. But the biggest trespass I ever got, I was in Southern California, and it was right at the end of my trip. I had already made my money and I set that aside, so I lowered my bankroll, and I was at a double deck casino, and I just decided to smash. And I lasted about 10 minutes, and I was surrounded by security and pit bosses. And that's one, I think, beneficial thing with COVID as it is right now, is they have those plexiglasses, which if you can focus your eyes correctly, you can actually see behind you without turning around.
Oh, yeah.
So I way maxed bet much more than they were comfortable with. And I kind of knew that. And but I was in a rental car because it's at a place that does do your license plate. So I was a rental car, didn't show any ID, and I had the risk to take it. So I just decided to go after him. And of course, the first shoe just max bets. And so I sit down, I buy in, and I'm max betting immediately. And one pit boss starts to freak out. He's calling other people. He doesn't have a player's card. And she's like, well, he doesn't need a player's card. And I'm like, all right, let's finish this before I have to get out of there. And I didn't make it much longer. And so there was security, and they're like, well, what's your name? And I'm like, no. And they're like, do you have ID? And I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to trespass you, and we're going to send your information out. I'm like, that's fine. You got to do what you got to do. So then he's like, all right, you need to leave. But I had just parked in a different section of the casino, so I didn't actually know how to get to the parking garage. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to need you to take me to this section. And so I just followed the security all around the casino till they got out. And that was kind of amusing because they took it so serious. I was it's not that big a deal. Come on. This is not, I wasn't betting two hands of 3,000 or anything like that. It was, they should have been able to take it. But apparently I did get information previously that they had been getting hit hard recently, probably because COVID just opened up. So maybe they weren't as friendly as they should have been. Yeah. But yeah, it was 6 security guards and like 4 suits just all around me. And I'm like, guys, and they're all like 6'4", of course. And I'm like, I'm about 5'9". I'm like, is this supposed to be intimidating or something? Can I just leave? Like, I'm not scared. Hit me. Go ahead. I don't care. There's a million cameras. Do whatever you want. And
so in general, how has the kind of post-COVID experience been compared to pre? I mean, I know you didn't have an elaborate career before, but
yeah. I'd say with just about everything, there's benefits and there's deficits. I do like how a lot of places are limiting it to 3 people, because if I get on a table, I don't have to worry about 7, 6, 7, 8 people at the table. Yeah. But that comes with the asterisk of if I get on a table. I definitely have been to casinos where I get there and every table is full and I'm in the middle of nowhere and I'm just walking around for like an hour, just going between table and table and table. And like, do I even want to stay here? Should I just go back to my hotel? And because there's nothing open. And then I see one across the room and I go to it and somebody's already, and it's actually somebody left their chips there and they're just at the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, no, I thought this was a spot.
Yeah.
And so that has been a problem sometimes. Some places' rules have degraded a little bit. We were talking about one of the casinos I was at on a trip I was supposed to be on. They were starting to cut off 2 and sometimes even more decks out of their 6-deck game.
Jeez.
And yeah, I sat down at the shoe and it had just started, so I didn't see where the cut card was. And I looked in the deck, I was like, that kind of looks a little big. Maybe it's the light. I had just gotten off a whole trip of playing double deck, so maybe I thought maybe my eyes were unaccustomed to 6-deck again, and I was like, that looks big. And I waited until the next shoe, and it basically looked like she just chopped it in the middle. And I was like, are you kidding me? Why is so I went back in the bathroom, I opened up the app and I run the numbers and I put the cut card at 2 decks, and it wasn't great, but it was still beatable. And I was like, well, I'm here. Let's see what I can do. But I did actually end up finding a couple of dealers that would do sometimes as low as 1 1/4. So I was able to try and stick with them and move with them through the transitions. But
well, yeah, I hear from a lot of people, and I'm hearing mixed. Some places it's worse, other places the pen has actually been better. But I guess the bigger question is, is the sky falling? With COVID, because I'm not really out there playing. I'm not playing. So I'm hearing different things, and it's hard for me to tell if it's like glass half empty, tendency, or if like the sky is falling.
Honestly, I would have to say it's even more of like a glass half full situation. Like there's bad parts to it. And maybe if you're stuck in one area, and I haven't been to a ton of markets yet, but I still think there's a lot you can do.
Cool.
So like everyone has been saying for as long as Blackjack has existed, it's over, it's ending. In my opinion, not even the pandemic has stopped it. It put it on a pause for a couple months, but
it's hard to tell if individuals are having heat or if like all card counters are having heat. I know I know plenty people are playing, but I just thought I'd ask you. So I know we're at over an hour here, so we'll probably wrap it up here pretty quick. But any other stories you wanted to share with people?
So one of the stories I wanted to talk about is basically trying to keep focused. And there was a story. I was at a casino again on my last trip in Southern California, playing a double deck game, and it very quickly just turned to chaos. And what had happened was there was 2 other players playing at the game, and one player decided he wanted to switch seats. Well, at these double deck games, there are no mid-shoe entry. So if you leave for a hand, you're done. But he told the dealer, he's like, hey, I want to switch over to the 3rd seat. So he got his chips, moved over, the dealer paused. And the other player, a few hands later, just grabs his chips and walks away. And the dealer starts dealing, and he turns around and says, no, I was just moving, and starts yelling at the dealer and the pit bosses. And the dealer's like, well, I'm sorry, you just grabbed your chips and left, and I've dealt, I can't deal you back in. And so he's the players yelling at him and yelling at the pit bosses, and I'm just like, oh my! And the count's like true 8 or something, and I'm like, just deal, please.
Yeah.
And so the guy's like, well, I can drop the shoe, and the other player said, yeah, I'll drop the shoe, and I was like, no, I'm not dropping the shoe. And so then he starts to deal to me and not the other player who said he wanted out, and then he's like, well, I wanted to play if he's playing. Well, I've already dealt. You can't come back in. And so now he's yelling at the dealer and yelling at the pit bosses. So I finished the shoe, and now there's just tons of heat on the game. Just not even for me. Just there's 4 or 5 pit bosses. Security is kind of circling the area, and I'm like, I don't want to be here right now. So I color up and I grab my chips and I leave. And as I leave and I grab the chips, I realize the dealer shorted me $500.
Oh no.
And I was like, I counted out my money. I walked away from the table. I counted out my money, and I was like, there was extra stacks of 500 there. That's not right. And so I had to go back into the casino, go to the pit boss and say, hey, look, I'm pretty sure you guys shorted me $500. So then I had to bring extra heat on. Well, it turned out not to be heat because fortunately there was another player that was buying in for like $8,000 at a table, 2 tables over. So they were all focused on her. He just made a quick call and gave me $500 and I got out. But there are times that sometimes just very unexpectedly things blow up in a casino and you couldn't have predicted them.
Yep. Well, that's a good reminder to people that, add up your chips before you leave the table. And if there's a mistake, you got, like you did, you got to stand up for yourself and get your money.
Yeah. I have lost like $1 before in some stuff. And I was just like, you know what? That means the dealer's making mistakes. Maybe I can capitalize on that later. I won't bring it up. But $500 is a little bit more than I wanted to leave on the table.
Yeah. Any other stories you want to leave us with?
Not really, I think.
Well, maybe in another year we'll have you back on and you can share some more stories and see how the 3/4 time is working for you.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank our sponsors, 4 Hour Work Week, Remit Sethi, I'll Teach You to Be Rich, credit cards, free money. Get lots of credit. No, I'm just kidding. Those are not. We don't have sponsors. But thanks, Pokrplyer, for being on the podcast. You guys can reach out to him through the forum if that's cool with you.
Of course.
Awesome. And thanks for sharing your story. And you guys can, learn card carrying on Blackjack Apprenticeship. We'll catch you guys later.